Congratulations, you did it. And now everything is destined to change tomorrow. Somewhere in the last few weeks, maybe even yesterday, you made a quiet decision the universe did not expect you to make yet. And that small inner shift sent out a signal that cannot be undone. You may not even realize how powerful that moment was, but it rerouted your path in a way that forces something to end tomorrow, something that was meant to drag on much longer. Now, with Neptune going direct, what unfolds tomorrow is no longer just an astrological event. It becomes the moment the universe must respond to the decision you've already made. And that's where everything becomes interesting. There is a version of your reality that you've been quietly walking away from, even if you never said it out loud. A world built on pretending, on half-truths, on performing the life others expected from you. You didn't fight against it, you simply stopped feeding it. And the moment you did, that old world began losing its power over you. Neptune rules illusions, masks, false comfort, the smoke we learned to breathe just to survive. Tomorrow, that veil finally gives way. The world you silently refused begins to collapse under its own weight. And the most surprising part, you don't need to lift a finger. The choice has already been made. Reality is simply rearranging itself to match it. And now comes the part nobody talks about, the part you most need to hear. Perhaps you've noticed people acting strange around you lately. More attitude, more tension, more unprovoked disrespect. None of it is random. It's a reaction to the energy you carry, the one most people can feel but cannot name. Spiritually aligned souls unintentionally reveal what others try to hide. Your presence exposes insecurities, illusions, and unhealed wounds. When someone isn't ready for that, they project it onto you. They assume you're judging them or pretending to be above them, when in truth, you're simply living in alignment. They feel uncomfortable because you make them confront themselves. That is why the attacks feel personal even when you've done nothing to provoke them. Light exposes what darkness tries to protect. Your calling, your growth, your purpose, they all attract resistance. If you felt targeted, misunderstood, or challenged for no rational reason, it's because you matter. The enemy never wastes energy on anything that isn't a threat. You are rising into a version of yourself that cannot be controlled the same way anymore, and everything trying to hold on to the old dynamic reacts to that shift. The pressure is proof you're breaking through, and what happens tomorrow makes that truth undeniable. Tomorrow, most people will wake up and move through life exactly the same. Still distracted, still confused, still wrapped in the fog they've learned to live inside. They won't notice anything shifting because they never trained their eyes to see. But you did. While the world stayed overwhelmed and entertained, you learned how to see in the dark. You navigated uncertainty with intuition instead of panic. You chose clarity before clarity was even available. That's why tomorrow hits differently for you. Neptune going direct removes illusions, but only those who want to see will actually see. Everyone else will keep stumbling through a maze that isn't even real anymore. You, however, will feel something powerful, a quiet certainty, a sense that the path you've been sensing is finally visible. Because you didn't wait for perfect timing, you aligned yourself with truth while the rest of the world looked away. Clarity appears first to those who honor it in the dark. Tomorrow, when the fog lifts, you won't be confused, you'll be ready. And what becomes visible next is exactly what you've been preparing for. Neptune going direct does not only shift your present, it awakens something much older inside you, something you haven't visited in years because life convinced you it wasn't important. Tomorrow marks the beginning of a strange kind of remembering, one that doesn't come through logic, but through the same doorway you shut down when you decided to grow up. Childhood dreams, the stories you're used to create at night, the worlds you imagined, those begin to resurface with a vividness that becomes impossible to ignore. There were moments in your childhood when you imagined a life so bold, so impossible, that you eventually dismissed it as fantasy. But what if those visions weren't wishes? What if they were fragments of who you already were? What if they were pieces of your spiritual blueprint trying to reach you before the world taught you fear and limitation? Tomorrow, that doorway reopens, not suddenly, but gently, like a memory waiting for the right moment. Those dreams weren't fantasies. They were pieces of your future self trying to reach you. Children do not dream at random. They dream from the soul. And with Neptune ruling imagination and the invisible, its direct motion reactivates the spiritual intelligence you were born with. Tomorrow reconnects you to the child who believed everything was possible, who saw meaning in everything, who felt protected by something unseen. That wasn't imagination, that was alignment. Tomorrow the universe hands you back the map you were born with, the one you lost when life grew loud. What comes back now isn't fantasy, it's destiny.
Every spiritual journey has a moment when the inner switch flips, not with drama, but quietly, almost effortlessly, like the soul finally exhaling after years of contraction. Tomorrow carries that potential for many. When Neptune moves direct, the fog that distorted your inner world dissolves, not because life becomes easy, but because you finally see things as they truly are. And once truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Awakening isn't about knowing everything, it's about no longer lying to yourself. For many, that honesty becomes the turning point that reshapes their entire path. One moment of clarity can dismantle years of inner struggle. You've been doing the work, choosing alignment in silence, choosing growth without applause, choosing truth even when it was uncomfortable. That's why tomorrow isn't just another date. It is the universe acknowledging your effort by shifting the landscape around you. Awakening is not a cinematic event. It is the moment your inner light becomes brighter than the outer noise. It is the realization that most of your battles were never between you and the world, but between you and the illusions you inherited. Neptune direct acts like a mirror wiping itself clean. You see yourself without distortion. Light replaces darkness the moment truth is accepted. Tomorrow marks that subtle transformation. A weight loosens, a confusion dissolves, a fear loses its grip. When illusions collapse, they no longer survive off your energy. Awareness is freedom, and tomorrow you step into that freedom. Tomorrow, many will wake up feeling disoriented, heavy, emotionally scrambled without understanding why. But the spiritually attuned will feel something completely different. A quiet, almost unbelievable relief. That feeling won't come from the external shift, but from the realization that something inside you has completed a cycle you didn't even know you were moving through. For months, you walked through a period that felt slow, stagnant, directionless. But Neptune's retrograde was never about delay, it was about observation. It was a silent examination of who you are when nothing validates your path. No signs, no shortcuts, no reassurances. Retrogrades are not punishments, they're X-rays. They reveal who you are when the world goes quiet. Silence is the universe's favorite testing ground. While you thought you were simply surviving a difficult season, you were being observed through the lens of trust, patience, and inner vision. Would you keep going without proof? Would you stay aligned without applause? Would you follow your inner voice even when the world outside tried to make you question everything? Most people didn't, and that's why tomorrow will be confusing for them. They kept waiting for visible evidence before committing to their path. But you kept walking, sometimes slowly, sometimes skeptically, but always connected to the unseen. You didn't abandon the inner truth that whispered there was more ahead, even when your life didn't reflect it yet. And now that Neptune is going direct, the gates open for those who didn't give up on what they couldn't see. This is why tomorrow feels like relief. The pressure was never life punishing you, it was life observing you. You've crossed a threshold where your trust has been proven, where your commitment has been anchored, where your inner clarity has become stronger than whatever illusions tried to sway you. Retrograde tested your relationship with the unseen. Neptune direct rewards it. And what unlocks next is reserved for the ones who kept their inner truth alive in a season designed to extinguish it. One of the biggest misunderstandings in spirituality is the belief that battles end when the enemy weakens, when in truth, most spiritual warfare stops not because darkness retreats, but because you become someone darkness can no longer manipulate. You've grown into a level of awareness and strength that old patterns, old temptations, and old fears cannot influence the same way. This shift didn't happen instantly. It was built slowly through every moment you chose honesty over illusion, alignment over convenience, intuition over noise. Much of what felt like warfare over the past months wasn't an attack on your life, it was resistance to your evolution. Darkness doesn't fight you because you're weak, it fights you because you're changing. When the light grows, the shadows panic. You've been shedding versions of yourself that were easy to control, and that alone created friction. Yet you didn't regress. You didn't return to the familiar storyline you once used to escape discomfort. That is why the cycle ends tomorrow. Breakthroughs rarely arrive with a dramatic explosion. They arrive when your inner frequency no longer matches the pattern that once drained you. They arrive when you stop feeding the story that made you small, when you stop negotiating with the version of yourself that was meant to expire. The battle ends because the version of you that the enemy targeted doesn't exist anymore. The shift happening tomorrow is exactly this. The war doesn't end because darkness weakens, but because you have evolved beyond the version of yourself who needed to fight. Tomorrow marks the moment when self-awareness overrides fear, when truth dissolves confusion, and spiritual maturity becomes your default state. The breakthrough was not something delivered to you, you became the breakthrough. And once you understand that, the next phase of your path takes on an entirely new meaning. For a long time now, many of you have been living with an invisible obstruction, something you could never fully describe but always felt the moment you tried to move forward. It appeared as situations that almost worked out, opportunities that almost landed, progress that almost solidified. You kept getting close, but something slipped, stalled, or collapsed at the very last moment. Because the blockage wasn't tangible, you blamed yourself, your timing, your luck, your effort. But what you were facing wasn't personal failure, it was a spiritual constraint meant to teach you something you didn't realize you were learning. This block wasn't punishment or dramatic karma. It was more like a boundary placed on your path until you grew into the version of yourself capable of sustaining what you were asking for.
Most people never recognize this kind of block because it doesn't announce itself. It quietly shapes timing, choices, and the rhythm of a journey. And for months, maybe even years, it forced you into deeper self-awareness, even if that awareness came through frustration instead of clarity. But tomorrow, that invisible block dissolves, not because Neptune is going direct, but because you have outgrown the frequency that required that restraint. Limits fall away the moment you no longer need them. You matured in ways you haven't even given yourself credit for. You became more discerning, more grounded, more aligned with your truth. You broke old emotional agreements. You stopped settling. You stopped chasing. You stopped abandoning yourself without even noticing the shift. You stepped out of the version of you who needed the lesson repeated, and the universe never continues teaching what you've already mastered. This kind of ending doesn't arrive with applause or fireworks, but with a deep, full-bodied exhale, a quiet recognition that something heavy has finally lifted. You may notice that after tomorrow, the resistance you used to feel around certain goals simply isn't there anymore. The friction you once interpreted as failure will feel like it evaporated overnight, though in reality it dissolved slowly through every difficult choice, every moment of restraint, every time you chose integrity over comfort. This is the kind of ending that arrives when the soul is ready, not when the mind demands it. And tomorrow, the soul says, "You're finally ready." What follows is not just momentum, it is liberation. There is a part of this transformation that most people don't recognize until long after it happens. You're no longer in the same timeline as the people who hurt you, the ones who doubted you, dismissed you, manipulated you, or tried to keep you small.
They may still exist physically in your world, but energetically, your lives no longer intersect. At some point, your growth accelerated beyond the timeline where their influence mattered. You might not have noticed the moment it happened, but tomorrow is when you will feel the separation. Timelines are not mystical fantasies. They are paths built by choices, awareness, and frequency. Over the past year, especially during Neptune's retrograde, your choices quietly created a divergence. You stopped responding the way you used to respond. You stopped needing what you used to need. You stopped trying to convince people who were never meant to understand you. You stopped holding on to relationships or identities that drained you. Without realizing it, you stepped out of the emotional dimension where those people once had power. Their timeline is built on old wounds, old narratives, old illusions. Yours is built on awakening, clarity, and self-respect. The overlap was temporary, and tomorrow marks the end of that intersection. This shift is not about losing people. It is about recognizing that you are no longer bound to the roles they assigned you. The emotional doorway is closed, not out of anger, but because you healed the part of you that kept it open. You don't need closure, revenge, explanations, apologies, validation, or victory. You simply walk into a reality where their influence cannot survive. And once you feel this difference tomorrow, the future opens in ways you couldn't access while carrying the weight of timelines that were never meant to be permanent. Tomorrow does not only end illusions, it restores something you didn't realize you had been grieving. There is a part of you, a piece of your spirit, a gift or inner knowing that life pushed so far down that you convinced yourself it was gone forever. You adapted. You grew around its absence. You learned to function without it because survival demanded it. Yet deep down, you always felt the shape of that missing piece, even if you couldn't name it. For some, this was wonder. For others, imagination, self-belief, fearlessness, emotional openness, or spiritual authority. It could have been a talent abandoned because someone called it impractical, a dream you stopped chasing, a version of you that trusted life instead of anticipating disappointment. Neptune retrograde buries these pieces under layers of fog, not to punish you, but to ensure that when they return, you are strong enough to hold them again. Tomorrow doesn't just end illusions, it restores what was taken from you. This restoration isn't about gaining something new, but about receiving back something that always belonged to you, yet was withheld until you were ready to integrate it. A gift like that cannot return to someone who still doubts their worth, who still betrays themselves seeking approval, or who navigates life from a place of spiritual scarcity. The universe allowed that part of you to go quiet so you could grow into someone who recognizes its value. When Neptune goes direct, it moves like a tide reversing its course. Everything that drifted too far from shore begins its slow return. Fragments of your purpose resurface, a forgotten passion reignites, a clarity you haven't felt in years settles into your awareness. You may experience moments of déjà vu or bursts of inspiration that feel strangely familiar, as if you are reconnecting with the timeline you were always meant to live. This is your soul retrieving what the world tried to bury. Your spirit has chambers that only open under the right energetic conditions, and tomorrow one of those locks finally clicks open. You may find yourself remembering who you were before life became heavy, not as nostalgia, but as a homecoming to the truth of who you were always becoming. That lost piece of you doesn't return to create more chaos. It returns to complete you. And once this inner completion begins, the outer world adjusts to match the version of yourself you're finally stepping into.
One of the most powerful yet rarely spoken effects of Neptune moving direct is the quiet ending of things that no longer carry meaning or purpose in your life. Some of you will wake up tomorrow and notice that something you've been carrying, forcing, or struggling to maintain simply stops moving. It won't collapse dramatically, and it won't end in chaos. It will just stop.
A thought pattern, a craving, a draining relationship, a situation you kept trying to repair, a habit you couldn't break, a cycle that has exhausted every possible way to repeat itself. Any of these may dissolve effortlessly. Don't be surprised if something in your life simply stops tomorrow, without any explanation or drama. This is not abandonment, it is alignment. Neptune dissolves what doesn't belong, but when it moves direct, it stops dissolving and starts clarifying. Your spirit stops negotiating with anything that fails to match your new frequency. Divine closures don't need theatrics, long conversations, or emotional unraveling. They leave your life the way illusions do, quietly, naturally, and without resistance. You may notice that a source of stress you battled for months suddenly loses its power. You may look at something you thought you wanted and feel absolutely nothing. You may realize the emotional pull someone once had over you has evaporated. These endings are not losses. They're confirmations that you have stepped into a new alignment where certain weights no longer fit. If you're still watching, thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more, please consider clicking the subscribe button. Your support is deeply appreciated. Feel free to share your reflections or experiences in the comments below. Until next time, take care and subscribe for more insightful content.